Your forecast first, sponsored by Matex Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing.
Well, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Calm conditions across the area. We've had these clear skies all day. Wow, what a Wednesday it was, and it's about to get even better for tomorrow, believe it or not. Temperatures tonight aren't too bad. We've got readings that are into the mid-30s right now. 36 in Champaign, Effingham, 37 in Springfield. So, again, upper 50s today. We're going to do it again tomorrow, and we may even touch 60 in some spots. After tomorrow changes. We're talking about rain and maybe some snow for some of you. We'll show you that when we come back. So stick around. WCIA 3 News starts right now.
The state's getting a limited amount of COVID-19 vaccine. Why that's not the only reason kids and teenagers can't get it. Those vaccines are supposed to go to certain counties, but what if those counties don't have a hospital from which to distribute them?
Plus, the pandemic has been hard on restaurants for months. Which one has now decided to close for good?
You're watching your local news leader. This is WCIA 3 News at 10.
We need to get through the next few months by doing what we need to do in order to have the vaccine can take an effect.
Distribution of the COVID vaccine is expected to begin in the U.S. next week, but it could take months before every age group is allowed to get the shots. Good evening, I'm Paul Cicchini.
And I'm Jessica Coons. Health experts are trying to balance vaccine distribution with the efforts to get kids back in school. WCIA 3's Jen Lask learned more about the reason kids and teenagers are not allowed to get vaccinated yet.
I have two kids at home as well, and I know they are definitely missing out by having a virtual experience rather than the in-school experience, which they're really craving right now.
That's why OSF's manager of pharmacist operations, Brian Laird, is eager for COVID-19 vaccines to be approved for kids. But the first round of clinical trials only included non-pregnant adults.
The Pfizer vaccine, they didn't start studying kids until about October. And for the Moderna vaccine, the other one that's the leading contender to be approved in the next few weeks, it just started in November.
Laird says scientists are not expecting the results to be that different for kids versus adults. However,
we need to make sure that we protect children, and that if it's going to have any kind of bad effects, which we do not expect for any reason, but I would much rather have an outcome that's not as effective in a 65-year-old or a 39-year-old than an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old.
In the meantime,
testing will be more important than ever.
Health experts like Dr. Rajiv Shah with the Rockefeller Foundation are calling on school districts to set up mass testing plans.
The vision that we've all laid out together of using fast, frequent testing as a screening tool to enable essential services to go forward remains America's best strategy to get kids in school.
Some districts have already started implementing those plans. For example, Champaign schools began partnering with Carl back in October to offer on-site testing. Even with elementary schools switching back to remote learning in November, the district says testing for staff and even some students has continued. All this giving Laird optimism as he urges people to get vaccinated and help build herd immunity.
Hopefully by fall, then we can all go back to some semblance of normal that we've been used to.
Reporting, I'm Jen Lask, WCIA 3, your local news leader.
Dr. Shah says the Rockefeller Foundation is working with U of I's SHIELD test leaders to implement more mass testing plans for K-12 schools. The U of I is helping other universities roll out saliva-based testing. ISU is working with the U of I to open a lab there. University leaders hoped to have the site up and running by now, but they're still awaiting approval from the FDA. All students living on that campus will be required to get tested before returning to their dorms.
Hospitals are preparing now to distribute the first doses to frontline healthcare workers, and they're going to the 50 counties with the highest death rates. Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell reports from Springfield.
Illinois is currently slated to get 109,000 doses of the vaccines.
The first doses of a COVID-19 vaccine could arrive in Illinois as early as next week. The Pritzker administration drew up a list to distribute a limited supply.
The very first vaccinations will be dedicated to hospitals and healthcare workers in the 50 counties with the highest death rates per capita.
These 50 counties with the highest death rates were first in line to receive shipments of the vaccine. But the state tracks deaths by where a person lived, not necessarily where the patient was treated.
We identified the 50 counties, and then we said, oh, wow, some of these counties don't actually have a hospital, but of course they would have first responders.
Sangamon County was not on that initial list of 50 counties with the highest death rates per capita. Nearby, Cass County was, but there's not a hospital in the entire county. So instead, they're redirecting their 70 doses of the COVID vaccine here to Sangamon County, where most of their COVID-19 patients come for treatment. That last-minute wrinkle and new development from the Department of Public Health forced hospitals like this one into overdrive as they plan at a fever pitch for logistics to deliver and store those vaccines at sub-zero temperatures before they ultimately administer them to frontline healthcare workers and eventually to patients. And as more vaccines become available,
this is the sort of thing that we're good at.
You may be able to get one in more places, including your local dentist's office.
In the same way that we paused our office for emergency care only early in the pandemic so we could share our PPE with the hospitals, I also want to feel like I'm participating with my medical colleagues by sharing and delivering the vaccine because they don't have enough hands to do it on their own.
Reporting in Springfield, Mark Maxwell.
Dentists will have to undergo special training before they can give you a COVID vaccine, and the state already cleared the way for them to start doing that training. A big meeting's on the calendar tomorrow at the FDA's Independent Advisory Committee on Vaccines. They could vote to recommend Pfizer's vaccine for emergency use. And new tonight at 10, J.T. Walker's Restaurant and Brewery in Mahomet is closing. The owner says this Sunday will be its last day. Justin Taylor says the current business climate in Illinois and Champaign County has made it impossible for bars and restaurants to survive. With the state's indoor dining restrictions, they can no longer afford to stay open. Taylor says he didn't want to drag out this decision because he wanted his employees to be able to look for new jobs before the holidays.
We made it through the hard years in 2008, 2009, 2010. Back when we opened, I thought if we made it through those years, we could make it through anything. But 2020 had a lot more in store for us than I think we were prepared for.
He says the brewery will continue to make beer until they run out of product. A final decision about the brewery's future will be made after that.
One restaurant still plans to serve food inside their building, even though their food permit was revoked. The Apple Dumpling in Urbana was visited by the health district last week for operating with indoor dining. Public Health visited again today and found nothing had changed. The owners did decide to shut down for the rest of the day today, but plan to open again tomorrow. They say they need to serve inside to make enough money to support themselves and their employees.
It is a clean restaurant. My kitchen is open. You can sit down in the dining room and see what's going on in my kitchen. We pride ourselves on it. We sanitize everything. I mean, I have so much extra mitigation going on in here, and I feel that we can operate safely.
The CU Public Health Administrator says the restaurant will be held in contempt of court. The state's attorney's office will likely get a temporary restraining order to shut them down. That office says they cannot comment on the situation at this time. IDOT officials say right now roughly 130 out of 5,000 employees across the state are out for COVID-related reasons. That includes positive tests and contact tracing. IDOT is preparing for the possibility that staffing levels will be impacted during the winter. It is setting up backup plans, but also asking people to be patient when it comes to clearing roads.
Let's take a look at the state's COVID-19 numbers. More than 8,200 new cases were identified in the last 24 hours. The positivity rate in this state is at 11.4%, with nearly 5,300 people in the hospital as of last night. In Region 6, 73% of ICU beds are being used. In Region 3, beds are a little harder to come by. 89% are being used. Bed use is up in both regions compared to yesterday. 179 more people have died, including 31 in central Illinois. More than 13,600 people have died so far. Here's another update. A jury convicted a man for the 2017 bombing of a mosque in Minnesota. Michael Harry was found guilty on all charges, which include civil rights and hate crime. hate crimes. The man from Clarence, Illinois, was the ringleader of a small militia group behind the bombing. Prosecutors outlined Harry's hatred for Muslims as his motivation. They cited anti-Islam excerpts from his manifesto as well. Harry's also charged with trying to set fire to a Champaign women's health clinic.
A Mason man faces up to 60 years in prison for murder. Christopher Glass's trial date is now set for January 26th. He's accused of shooting Kimberly Mattingly in Effingham County. A judge already sentenced Aaron Kaiser to 8 years in prison for his connection to Mattingly's murder. He was convicted of concealing a homicide. We have some new information on a man accused of hitting a woman with his car over the weekend. We told you yesterday Paul Thiesfield was charged with attempted aggravated criminal sexual assault and attempted aggravated kidnapping. The state's attorney says Thiesfield hit a woman with his car on Saturday in an attempt to incapacitate her so he could kidnap and rape her. Thiesfield was terminated from his positions as water superintendent in both Elliott and Roberts.
Are there any snow days in a world of virtual learning? That's what one school district will be deciding.
Plus, teachers have had to get creative this year, how some are making in-class instruction work with safety in mind.
And the Illinois men's basketball team got a lot of hype in the preseason. They earned all of it and more last night.